Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and you know what time of the week it is. It's Friday. Gotta get down on Friday because it's time to talk about my wrestlers of the week. And this episode is brought to you by the song Down by popular artist of the early 2010s and late 2000s, Jay Sean, because I listened to it before this video and it's got me really hyped, so it's nice. So yeah, once you finish bopping along to that banger of a track, settle down, settle in for some lovely wrestlers of the week action. But who were my wrestlers of the week? Well, let's just rank them. I've forgotten my intro because I'm so distracted by Jay Sean. What do I normally say at this point? Oh yeah. So it's been a great week of wrestling, blah, blah, blah. But it actually has. There's been a lot of great wrestling matches in various different promotions. It's a very varied top 10 in terms of which promotions we'll be covering. So without any further ado, let's check out the honourable mentions. Honourable mentions this week go to the likes of, first of all, I think we need to shout out Tomohiro Ishii, who continues to rumble along in the G1 Climax, putting on good matches every week, sometimes twice a week, but not really winning all that much, which is a shame. And I should point out actually that today's G1 Climax Block A finale is not actually going to be taken into account. Remember, we go from Friday to Thursday night the next week. So today's matches aren't being taken into consideration. They'll be taken into consideration for next week. I also want to give a big shout out to Lee Moriarty, who I'm not too familiar with. I think he's a bit of a new up-and-comer on the scene, maybe. I could be very wrong saying that, but he is only just sort of becoming more prominent, I guess. He had some very, very good matches this week, gaining a lot of rave reviews, new fans and that sort of thing. I'm certainly among them. So hopefully he can continue to push on and do really good stuff. And finally, Cody, who is obviously one of the front runners of this league table. He's not in the top 10 this week, which shows how competitive it was, but he had a fantastic match on Dynamite. If he got the win, he probably would be on the top 10, but it looked like Orange Cassidy may have had him beat. So obviously it was a time limit draw and Cody does not make the top 10. But let's see who did as we look at my number 10. Number 10 this week, picking up 1 point, is somebody who could have a fantastic 2021, and that could be started by what happens late on this year as he moves forwards. It's Big E. Now Big E obviously is part of the New Day, or is formerly part of the New Day, I suppose, but as a New Day guy is often known for joking around, dancing, having a great time. But apparently there's been reports that, you know, obviously the New Day have split now, or Xavier and Kofi have been moved over to Raw, and maybe Big E's about to get more serious. And we saw a bit of evidence of that actually on last week's SmackDown. Because that SmackDown opened in very entertaining fashion actually. I think the first half of that show was way more entertaining than the second half, but you know, it could well have main evented. I suppose they didn't want to because it was Falls Count Anywhere maybe, but we had Big E and Sheamus in just a wild brawl all over the arena and backstage. I was very entertained by the match, and Big E hadn't completely lost his comedy touch, of course, finding a big inflatable bootio under the ring, for example, but he did get his game face on as they went to the back through catering that were covered in food, into the parking lot, some nasty looking spots on like car bonnets and hoods and that sort of thing. And in the end, Big E came out victorious. And I think Sheamus has to be applauded for helping get Big E to the next level slightly there with a big defeat to him. And I think Big E has to be applauded as well for his excellent performance. I think he's a really easy babyface to get behind, of course. And I think if this does result in a big singles push, then I'm very excited for him to see what happens. So a good start for Big E, certainly. I just wonder where this is going to lead. Could he win the Rumble? Could he go on to WrestleMania and get a title shot? Could he win a big world title at Mania? I don't know. I really don't know, because at the minute, obviously Roman Reigns being Universal Champion, it doesn't look like he's going to be losing to anybody anytime soon, but we'll have to see. Next up, number 9, now it's Sonata from New Japan, right, who before the G1 Climax was kind of touted as someone who was going to run away with the tournament. He hasn't really done that, but he's been doing well. He's been doing decently, just maybe not as well as everybody thought he would. Everyone seemed to think, right, now is Sonata's time, here we go. That hasn't quite happened yet. But Sonata did pick up a big victory, possibly his biggest victory of the tournament so far last week, or this week even, against Hiroshi Tanahashi. Anytime anybody gets a clean victory over the ace of New Japan, it's a big deal. And it was a good match as well, and Sonata did really well. But yeah, these 2 points are awarded to him with a little bit of caution, a little bit of hesitancy, because I don't know where he's going to go from here. Maybe the story of this G1 Climax hasn't been all about Sonata, as many assumed it might be. I don't know, but we're certainly going to see what happens as the B block finale is coming up. I do feel bad for a lot of people in the B block because the A block was so just chock full of elite level world wrestling talent, and the B block by comparison looked maybe a little bit weak, but it's telling just as strong a story, I think, even if the in-ring quality hasn't been on quite the same level. So fair play to Sonata, a good win there, a good result, and maybe he'll get some more points next week. Maybe things will come to a head a little bit more, and maybe Sonata will be thrust further into the spotlight. Although, I don't know, maybe it'll be a stablemate instead. Maybe it'll be Evil, his former stablemate, apologies, because obviously Evil now is Evil. Who could have seen that coming? Number 8 this week, not a man that I expected to be on Wrestlers of the Week in 2020, but man, I'm pleased to put him on there with 3 points. It's former Ring of Honor star, former Impact star, indie legend. He's been around forever. It's Homicide. Now we have to talk a little bit about GCW, right, who put on a lot of events this week, and there's been controversy because of COVID and everything, and kind of the nature of their shows. A lot of people on each show, fans in attendance as well, kind of socially distanced, but I can see why it stirred up a lot of controversy. So I've mentioned that now. I'm going to try and focus on what actually happened at these shows. So let's talk about Bloodsport. Coming out of Bloodsport, there were 2 big stories really. One was that Moxley appeared, of course, and one was that Homicide had a banger of a match against Filthy Tom Lawler. Now obviously Homicide did not win the match, he lost to Filthy Tom, but it was still very entertaining and many people's favourite match of the event. And if you're not familiar with Bloodsport or how it goes, or you've never watched a Bloodsport event, basically what happens is you've got no ropes, you've got winning only by knockout or submission. It's a little bit more shoot style. It's meant to be kind of like MMA but in a pro wrestling context. I think it's decent, I think it's pretty good. It's very hit and miss, obviously. These sort of events are quite hit and miss, but when a match lands, when a match does really well, it's so easy to enjoy it, because it's just guys hitting each other very hard, trying to wrench each other's limbs off. There's a lot of aggression, and I think when it goes right, it's very entertaining. And Homicide's match was certainly very entertaining. A big part of that was Filthy Tom Lawler, who probably should have had an honourable mention, in fact, I'll give him one now. But Homicide, man, just rolling back the years with an excellent performance in a setting which kind of suited him down to the ground, really. He's always been very rough and ready, big stiff strikes and that sort of thing. And I think he did himself very, very proud. So, sound like his teacher on Parents' Day. Mr. and Mrs. Homicide, your son's done really well there, so he gets 3 points on Wrestlers of the Week. Number 7 this week, I've just mentioned him, and he's closing in on Cody at the top of the Wrestlers of the Week league table. It's Jon Moxley, the AEW World Champion. He led the table for a long time, of course, but also slipped into second and is now catching back up. And the reason he's doing so is because of 2 excellent but very different matches this week. One in the GCW Collective at Bloodsport and one at Dynamite. So Moxley did rock up at Bloodsport. He took on Chris Dickinson, a big standout of the US independent scene, of course, probably an honourable mention for him as well. And Moxley picked up the win, of course, that was kind of predictable, but he kind of did well, didn't he? His style kind of lends itself decently to Bloodsport. I do think that Moxley is kind of a pro wrestler dressed in shoot fighter's clothing rather than an actual shoot style guy. He's very good at being a pro wrestler rather than a shoot style guy, but he can certainly do shoot style stuff, and it was certainly entertaining, even if he wasn't as natural a fit as someone like Filthy Tom Lawler, for example, who has MMA experience. But I still really enjoyed it. He brought his own style to the table. It worked really well. It was in a big match, obviously, in the context of the show, and clearly something that Moxley is passionate about. At this stage of his career, he doesn't need to take these bookings, but he clearly did it because he wanted to, and he thought it would be fun, and it looked like he had a blast. So fair play there. Then on Dynamite, of course, on Wednesday night, we had Moxley main eventing the anniversary show, defending his title against Lance Archer. And even though on the surface it was a similar sort of match with violence and, just two guys just really going at it, it was actually very different from the Dickinson match. That's because the Dickinson match was a contest, it was shoot style, it was athletic. This match was more of a brawl. Occasionally it resembled a hardcore match because it was no DQ. It was very much in Moxley's wheelhouse, this one, and it was entertaining. He took a beating off Lance Archer for a lot of the match, but he managed to fight back, of course, and pick up the victory. A victory which kind of made Archer look good at the same time. The reason for that is that really Archer had Moxley's number, kind of. He really did seem to have him beat, and then Moxley rolled him up for a quick 3 count and the win. I think that was a wise decision. You don't want Moxley to dominate Archer and just make him look like a fool. You want him to really have to struggle through this match. He did so, and it seems like this little feud with Eddie Kingston's stable is rumbling on because Moxley, of course, got jumped by Kingston at the end of the show. So an eventful week for Moxley there, and it yields him a lovely few points in Wrestlers of the Week. Now, on to number 6. Number 6, we're sticking with AEW Dynamite and my favourite match on the show, and the man who went into that match, I think, without a hope of winning it, and then almost did, came within a whisker of winning it, it's Orange Cassidy. So when Cody had that brilliant match with Brody Lee last week, I thought, oh, how are they going to follow that? And then Orange Cassidy came out and announced himself as the next challenger, and I thought, don't know how this is going to go. And I did not expect, honestly, and I'm a fan of Cody and Cassidy, I did not expect the match to be as entertaining as it was. But it was very, very good. It was long, it was well developed, it took us on a journey. The Dark Order got involved as well and then got ejected. Orange Cassidy had a chance to cheat, actually. He had the belt in his hands and then passed it to Arn Anderson instead of clocking Cody with it. And generally showed himself to be one of the most just naturally gifted wrestlers on the AEW roster. Cassidy makes it look so effortless and so easy that really, you kind of want him to bust out his frantic style a bit more when he actually cares, but I understand why he doesn't all the time, because part of his charm, of course, is that he doesn't care. So when he does, it means a lot more. The ending of the match was superbly timed. Both men had thrown everything at each other. Cody had kicked out of Orange Cassidy's finisher when it looked like all was lost and he was going to lose. And then Cassidy caught him in the mousetrap, that little submission that he beat Jericho with. The ref got down to count 1, 2, time limit draw. And the timing of it was perfect. And yeah, I mean, it looks great for Orange Cassidy. He didn't win the belt, but he's taken Cody to the limit and pretty much looked like he had him beat as well. It didn't look like Cody was going to kick out. I don't know what's next. Maybe they'll do a rematch because it was a draw. Although, of course, Darby Allin was announced as the next #1 contender for the TNT Championship. So maybe they'll do a triple threat. Maybe it'll be Orange versus Darby to find out who goes on to face Cody. Maybe Orange will just do something else for a while. I really don't know. It looks like the Best Friends are about to feud with Miro and Kip Sabian. Maybe he'll get involved in that. There's a lot of avenues that AEW can go in with Orange Cassidy at the moment, but I really don't know which one it's going to be. Next up, number 5, the man who... Right, okay, this is a bit of a spoiler if you haven't yet watched the finale of the A block of the G1 Climax and you want to. This is the man, just about to spoil it now, so just be careful. This is the man who was qualified for the final of the G1 Climax, winning the A block, Kota Ibushi. But we're not taking his match with Taichi today into account because, of course, it's Friday and I cut things off on Thursday night. So instead, we're going to be looking at his matches from last week, one of which was very entertaining. So Ibushi really needed to turn it on, you know, because he wasn't doing well in the A block and he needed to, you know, win the damn thing and go to the final. And then he turned it on last week, defeating Yujiro Takahashi in, you know, an alright match. But then he had a banger of a match against Menorah Suzuki where both men really set out to hurt each other, and that was really good. And he came out on top as well. So that was really good stuff. And in doing so, in this little run of form he's been on in the past week, Ibushi has not only secured a path to the final of the G1 Climax, he's also actually made himself the only, what was it again? Chris Charlton said it on commentary. He's a record holder. He's the first person to go to 3 consecutive G1 Climax finals. And I think that apparently is a record as well. Maybe a modern record rather than a historic one, but certainly a record of sorts. Bushi's done it. First of all, he faced Tanahashi, then Jay White last year, and now we'll find out in due course who he's going to face in the 2020 final. But I can't really linger on Ibushi for too long because I want to get on to number 4 and talk about him because it was the man he faced in one of those matches this week. It's Menorah Suzuki. So Suzuki kind of had the opposite trajectory to Ibushi in this year's G1 Climax. He started off really strong. He was doing really well in the A block despite not being one of the natural frontrunners you'd think. Started off being one of the frontrunners, maybe the frontrunner, and then just his form just went down a cliff. But this week, despite losing both of his big featured matches, Suzuki did really, really well in both, man. I mean, his match with Ibushi was one of the matches of the tournament so far, in my opinion, and his match with Jay White was pretty damn good as well. And it's nice to see Suzuki in the weird pseudo babyface role, which we never really see him in these days, because Jay White's probably the most pure heel in New Japan right now. And, you know, we all wanted Suzuki to beat him. And it was a really interesting and fun dynamic. But instead, Jay White beat him, Ibushi beat him. And despite those 2 losses, I'm giving him a pretty hefty whack of points on this week's Wrestlers of the Week, just because his matches were really impressive. And I can't believe how many good matches Suzuki puts on despite his age. He's so good and never seems to age or tire. It's very strange. So Minoru Suzuki is my number 4 this week. Now on to the top 3. And we're going to talk about the man who I think has probably been this year's G1 Climax MVP. And the man I'm talking about is none other than the Dragon, last week's Wrestler of the Week, Shingo Takagi. Or I should say 2 weeks ago, because last week's was Finn Balor, wasn't it? Okay. Shingo Takagi, really good. Number 3 this week. Big Shing did really well this week. Yes, he lost both of, I think, his G1 Climax matches. Did he lose both of them? Let me check, 1 second. Mate, he did. He lost both of his matches this week, and they were both really good. He put over Taichi, who you just hate to see win, which is a good trade, I suppose, for a heel, but Shingo lost to him in a very good match, but in an excellent match. Possibly, probably a match of the year contender, possibly the best match of this year's G1 Climax. Shingo Takagi lost to Kazuchika Okada, and Shingo at one stage blasted Okada with the Rainmaker, which Okada's been kind of staying away from and using his wildly unpopular money clip submission finisher instead. So Shingo thought, right, well, if you're not going to, I'll have a blast of that then. Bang! Rainmaker to Okada. It didn't pick him up the win, but it was still an enthralling match, which could really have gone either way. Halfway through, I was starting to think, you know what, I think Shingo's got this. I think he's going to actually beat Okada. He didn't, but it was still very entertaining. A very, very strong match. And that's why Shingo gets so many points this week. The match against Taichi showcased what Shingo can do in a different way, putting over an opponent who perhaps doesn't match up to him as well physically, but, you know, uses sneaky heel tactics and that sort of thing. And to be fair, Taichi's been showing a lot of bravery for him recently too. Shingo basically demonstrating how you can put over somebody who doesn't appear to deserve to beat you, but do it in a way that comes across pretty satisfactorily. I should have said satisfactory. That was the real word I should have said. I've just made up satisfactorily. That's pathetic, Jack. Come on. Right, we're nearly at the end. I can do this. I'm gonna power through. Number 2, a man who's had a tumultuous time recently in his recent career, joining WWE. A cloud of controversy, allegations of racism, allegations of unprofessional behaviour thrown every which way, both from him and at him and to him. He's had a really tough time, and I feel pretty bad for him. But now he's on form once again, and it's ACH. Yeah, after bringing up that he felt like he was treated differently because of his race in WWE, and then apologising for either the statements or the way that he went about making those statements. I can't exactly remember which. It seemed like ACH really maybe had kind of done something that was going to really affect his career. I'm not saying that it was right that it would affect his career, but it seemed like maybe it was going to affect it. Instead, he's come back this week and just blown the doors off with a bunch of fantastic matches. Again, at the controversial GCW collection of events, but at the same time, you can't deny the quality that ACH has brought this week. And he didn't even win a single match either. He lost all 3 of the big matches he took part in, but all 3 of them were bangers in different ways. First, he lost to Lee Moriarty, the guy that I've given an honourable mention to at GCW for the Culture. Really good match, probably the best match on the card. And again, ACH being selfless, putting over somebody less experienced than him who's making their way in the wrestling world and doing so in a very entertaining way. Then he went to Glory Pro Wrestling and challenged for the Crown of Glory title against AJ Gray and lost that match as well. That was also arguably the best match of the event. Again, ACH just showing how good he really is and how quickly we forgot that in the past sort of 2 years. And then finally a Joey Janela's Spring Break, and I'm going to say this one's unquestionably the best match on that show because that was a lot of comedy, and I mean, Joey Janela and Ricky Morton had an entertaining match towards the end. Of course, Ricky Morton can still go to a ridiculous level, but the best match on the show was ACH taking on Lio Rush and losing to him in a match of kind of WWE outcasts, and it was a really interesting dynamic, and it was really probably my favourite match of the 3 just for the story behind it as much as anything. ACH has wrestled his arse off this week. 3 very good matches, 3 defeats as well, but man, what a week he's had, and that's why he's getting 9 points on this week's table. And finally, number 1, and my wrestler of the week this week. It's a man who hasn't been wrestler of the week as much as you might expect, given his kind of de facto status as the best in the world, but when he does become wrestler of the week, kind of always just feels right, doesn't it? I think this is his 4th time ever topping the table on Wrestlers of the Week in 3 years, which isn't actually that much, but I've got to hand it to him. This week's Wrestler of the Week is the Rainmaker himself, Kazuchika Okada. Okada had 2 fantastic matches this week. The one against Shingo that I talked about, which was excellent. One against Ishii, which was still very, very good. Not quite as much of the year quality as the one against Shingo, but still very, very good as well. And Okada's just very much back on his game. He has not been a popular figure in this year's G1 Climax. He's been frustrating a lot of his fans for his kind of refusal to use the Rainmaker. As I mentioned, his over-reliance on the money clip submission, which just nobody seems to like. I don't like it, you probably don't like it. But man, he's been wrestling his arse. Why have I been saying wrestling his arse off recently a lot? Said about ACH as well. He's been wrestling a lot and very, very well too. Yeah, both of Okada's matches were superb, especially that Shingo one. As much Shingo's, doing as Okada's as well, but I feel like Okada in this past week has redeemed himself a lot. Hopefully he can go forwards and crack on, and we'll see what he can really do. But for now, I'm just happy to see him at the top of the Wrestlers of the Week league table once again. Not the full league table, just this week's one. But you never know what's going to happen in the future. Congratulations, Kazuchika Okada. You are my Wrestler of the Week. So, as you can see, Cody is still number one, but Moxley is catching up. And so is Shingo Takagi, right into joint second place there, alongside the AEW World Champion. As we move further down, we can see the likes of last week's winner, Finn Balor, right up there in the top 10. Asuka, of course, as well at number 9. And as we move a little bit further down, we'll see at some point Adam Page, somebody who I think can really burst on and really pick up some places in this table as the year comes to an end. A little bit further down as well, we've got Darby Allin right there, sneaking onto the bottom of the top 20, because of course it's his time to challenge Cody for that TNT title in the coming weeks. And so that's it for this week's Wrestlers of the Week. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Leave your thoughts and opinions and wrestlers recommendations in the comments section down below. Stay safe out there, keep yourselves positive, and I'll see you very soon.